Jesus, and God has been working in my life in many different ways to help me overcome struggles with shame, guilt, unforgiveness, control, and anger. So a little backstory: growing up, I did not have a true relationship with God. I did grow up going to a Catholic church, and I was baptized as an infant. I went to catechism as a young child and then attended Mass on mostly important holidays, but never really on a regular basis. At 14 years old, my mother and father divorced, and I blamed myself for years for their marriage ending. My mom had left my father a couple times after me witnessing a lot of verbal and mental abuse between them, but every time I cried to my mom, and my mom would end up going back. But one day, my mother and father got into a very bad altercation in front of me, and I was extremely scared. I ran out the back door, I jumped off our 6-foot deck, and I ran to a friend's house, and there, my friend's mother and older sister had called the cops, and my dad left in the back of a cop car. My dad held a grudge on me for getting him arrested for years and even into adulthood. After their divorce, I had a very strained relationship with my father. We wouldn't talk for months, and then at the age of 24, before I had my first son, I cut off all communication with him because of his anger that he had towards me. I married right out of college and moved to Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, here in the area, after getting my bachelor's degree in nursing. And then I gave birth to my 2 sons, Chase and Weston. My then husband did not want my father in my kids' lives either. Throughout my marriage, I experienced many feelings of not being good enough. We actually began counseling prior to even getting married, and then throughout the years of our marriage, we attended marriage counseling numerous times. I often felt very alone as I took care of my boys while my then husband worked several hours outside of the home. When he would come home, there would be a lot of arguments, that the house was always messy, even if I cleaned it, and nothing was just done right. I would get corrected if I didn't make the bed right and the corners weren't perfect, tight against the mattress, if the vacuum didn't put the lines correctly in the carpet, and if the countertop wasn't cleaned off good enough. I started to resent my then husband because no matter how hard I tried, it was just never good enough. I ended up starting a health and fitness business in 2012 after having my second son, and I found a community of women who I enjoyed connecting with regularly. It brought me a lot of joy that I was able to serve others, and I felt like I made a difference, and I was often commended for the hard work that I put in with the words of affirmation that I didn't feel I had at my home. In 2014, my marriage was falling apart, and I filed for divorce after having an emotional long-distance affair on my husband for about 2 months. I ended up confessing my sin to my husband because I felt so much guilt and shame. I still resented him and felt that I was at my lowest point in my life, even though I had no clue what was to come. So I decided to check out a local church that someone I knew went to. My husband refused to go since we irregularly went to a Catholic church and it was not the same denomination, but I still took my boys. The moment I walked in, I felt at peace. I felt at home and like the true presence of Jesus was with me that I never felt before. I sobbed as the worship team sang "Give Me Faith" by Elevation Worship and "Broken Vessels" by Hillsong United. I never heard those songs before that first service that I attended, but they are 2 songs that will stick with me. Going to church and working on my relationship with the Lord led me to dropping the paperwork for the divorce and working on my marriage and putting in more effort. For the first time, I was going to church regularly. I was building friendships within the church community, and I got baptized June 7th of 2015. Although my relationship with Jesus was growing, there were still many marital problems, more marriage counseling, and another year of fighting for my marriage. But in January of 2016, my marriage ended. When my marriage ended, I felt like God was calling me to reconnect with my father, and he met my boys for the first time when they were 3 and 4 years old. There was still a lot of tension between my father and me, but I saw the joy that he was having being able to build a relationship with my boys. About 4 months later, an incident changed my life. It was May 14th of 2016. I was at a grocery store parking lot picking up a movie to enjoy with a friend. In the blink of an eye, I became the offender of a pedestrian accident. I was simply looking at the wrong place at the wrong time, and my life was forever changed. As I was pulling out of the main drag of a parking lot, I struck a woman in the crosswalk. She passed away just 3 days later. The guilt, the shame, and the inability to forgive myself had me not wanting to wake up most days. I would have flashbacks of the entire accident multiple times a day, and I still do. I would see the victim even though she wasn't really there, at stores and even in my own home. I would force myself to go back to the parking lot, and I would park on the opposite side because I couldn't possibly go back to the same side. And I would just scream and sob and pound on the steering wheel, asking God why he allowed this to happen. Why did I have to be there at that time? I was supposed to go to the other red box for a movie, but I just decided to go to the next one up the street instead. Why did she have to be right there in my blind spot? Why couldn't I have just waited seconds until she wasn't there anymore? Those are the questions that I asked myself so often. I was so angry with myself that I just couldn't bear to forgive myself. Almost 1 year later, my trial ended in me having 5 years of probation, 300 hours of community service, and thousands of dollars in fines. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." For days, months, and years, I felt like I could never see something good that has come out of something so bad that I took somebody's life. Just a few months after my accident, I met my now husband, Brent. God brought him to me exactly when he knew I needed him. Through my struggles, Brent has comforted me. More importantly, he has been a huge part in me growing in my relationship with Jesus. I knew Jesus was working through him to get to me, but with this new relationship and marriage, since we did marry just 6 months after meeting, came a lot of baggage with a blended family. In 2017, after getting married, we started going through court to have any time with my stepkids. Our time was taken away, and we even had to work harder to maintain any physical contact and any type of communication that was trying to be removed from us. Over the past 5 years, I started attending Celebrate Recovery. I needed healing from the shame, guilt, unforgiveness, and anger that I was carrying. I felt like I was holding myself hostage and trying to control every situation that came my way. When I heard about Celebrate Recovery, I knew that it was for those who were hurting and needed Jesus, and I was that person. I was in so much pain mentally, and my desire to grow closer to Jesus was getting stronger and stronger. During Celebrate Recovery, my husband kept talking to me about working through the 12 steps. He was so confident that I would go through this program and I would find healing that I needed, and my relationship with the Lord would be even stronger. So I signed up and I started working through it. As I worked through these steps, I realized that not only did I carry the weight and hurt from my accident, but I was also holding on to anger and resentment from my past with my father, with my ex-husband, and even with my husband's ex, as we struggled through the blended family issues. And I also realized I struggled with codependency. Step 2 says, "We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose." Philippians 2:13. This step hit me hard. I was trying to work through the healing ultimately on my own. I would give it to God, and then I would take it right back. I wasn't truly letting go and letting God work my situation out. I also realized that every time I attempted to take control, I was telling God that he wasn't good enough for me and that I didn't trust him. As I worked through my steps, I was able to surrender my accident, my relationship with my father, my struggles with our blended family, and I laid them at the feet of Jesus. Let's go back to that verse that I shared earlier, Romans 8:28. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." From 2014, when I first started attending my church, to March 1st of 2016, when I had my trial and my sentencing, I have always said I wanted to serve my community and volunteer, especially at church. I never once followed through. It wasn't until I received my sentencing of 300 hours of community service that I was forced to finally take those steps because I wouldn't do it on my own. I felt like God was saying, okay, Deidra, you keep saying that you want to do this to serve me, but you aren't doing it, so I'm going to help you. And it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Through the community service, I have met incredible people, built new relationships and close friendships, and the feeling of serving brings me so much joy to my heart. God truly turned a horrible situation into good, and he has helped me learn, grow, and heal. And also, as of March 1st, last week, I completed my 5 years of probation. As I became willing to surrender my relationship with my father, I was able to use step 9 and apply it. We made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And the verse from Matthew 5:23-24, therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled, then come and offer your gift. Although my father made his mistakes, I realized that I was not perfect either and that I have hurt him. On Father's Day of 2019, my husband Brent was encouraging me to let go and actually take the steps to apologize for the grudges against my dad. I went into this not expecting anything back. I needed to do this for my own healing. That day I called and we had one of the best conversations where I was able to ask for forgiveness for how he felt hurt through what I have said and done. I could not have done this on my own. It was truly through the help and strength of Jesus and my husband's encouragement that the mending of my relationship with my father happened. And this was a huge turning point that also allowed healing for my father. I have also been working on surrendering the need to control the last 4.5 years of court and fighting for a relationship and contact with my stepchildren. Letting go and letting God in the midst of custody battles has allowed me to move and has allowed God to move and work for us. Since our custody trial last year, God has showed up and worked miracles that I never thought would happen. We now have one of my stepkids living with us full time, and we also have a stronger relationship with my other 2 stepkids, and their mindset of being with us has significantly changed in a positive way. One other area of control that God has been working with me is finances. I grew up not having a lot of money. My mom worked really long, hard hours to provide for me, especially after the divorce with my mom and dad. I was determined to not struggle with finances and to not ever make my kids feel like they couldn't have nice things. So I worked hard and I saved and I budgeted. When I started going to church, I would give a little bit here and there, but I didn't give a specific amount. As I began reading the Bible more, and after I married Brent, I began to learn about the biblical principle and discipline of tithing, or giving 10% of my income to the church. I felt like I gave a lot already, but I didn't realize that there was an actual percentage that I was supposed to give. In January of 2018, we began the Financial Peace University class that was offered at our church. Brent and I sat down and we began working on our budget. As I wrote everything out, I had some fear creeping in and I was thinking, we don't have much money left over. When Brent looked at the budget, he asked, well, what about tithing? About a month later, I was paying the bills and I listed everything to Brent about what I paid. But he asked, did you mention tithing? I cringed when he said that because I honestly felt that we couldn't tithe on anything with that paycheck other than paying our bills. So I said, we don't have any money left over to tithe. And he replied, giving back to God should never be based on what we have left over. It should be the very first thing we take out of our paycheck. That is why it is called the first fruits. Out of my anger and frustration, I spouted out, well, God's not going to pay our bills. My husband looked at me and replied, he's not? He's the one who has provided you with a job to pay the bills. But it is your job and your money, and I'm not going to force you to do anything. This is between you and God. So I ended up tithing that day, somewhat begrudgingly, I must admit. I told my husband that I did, and his response was, "I'm so proud of you. Now watch how God blesses your faith." About a month later, I was meeting with my accountant since it was tax season, and he told me that I overpaid with our taxes. I was shocked because that has never happened. I've always had to pay in when I submitted my taxes. When I told my husband the amount that I overpaid, he smiled and pointed out the amount that I was getting back was 10 times the amount of what my tithe was on that day of our conversation. God had multiplied my giving and gave it back to me, and I have never missed tithing ever since that day. Mark 5:34 says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." God wants us healed. God is waiting for us to take the steps to let go of our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, and to surrender them to Him so His purpose can be fulfilled. Although I am not completely healed, and I still go through my struggles, these 12 steps have helped me find so much healing and freedom through Jesus. I can do anything through Christ who strengthens me. Thank you for letting me share.